Hi and hello, and a warm welcome to everyone joining our conversation today, where we'll be looking at the connection between a healthy mind and a healthy business. Today's session is specifically not only for entrepreneurs, but for anyone who has an entrepreneurial mindset as well. And to get things started, let me just introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Gail Withers, and I'm your host for today's discussion. I'm a corporate training facilitator hailing from the beautiful island of Barbados, and I help business owners create training programs designed to empower their frontline teams professionally and personally. I'm also the co host of the LinkedIn Sunday Chat Show with Karen Fraser, as well as the editor of the Epic Entrepreneurship newsletter, which can be accessed by everyone on LinkedIn. For today's chat, I'm joined by Karen Griffith, a mental health counselor from Barbados, Mike Pasco, a mental well-being coach from Canada, and Joy Langley, an emotional and mental growth coach from the UK. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm going to get the ball rolling by letting you introduce yourselves as well as tell us just a little bit about what led you to where you are today. We're going to start off with Karen and then go on to Joy and have Mike share with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Gail. It's a pleasure to be here again, and I'm also really looking forward to being a part of this conversation with Joy and Mike. So, as Gail would have shared, I am a mental health counselor. I have my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of the West Indies here in Barbados, and I have my master's degree in mental health counseling from Fordham University. In terms of my professional experiences, I've had the opportunity to work with a number of different populations, including adults with developmental disabilities, families, and children as well. And I really got into this field just out of a curiosity into how human beings think and how we behave and how we can be well. So it is something that I have been interested in and really exploring for from the time I've left my school years, and I've been continuing to do that in all through my professional and volunteer experiences. My goal when I work with my clients is really to help them to identify their strengths and then use those strengths to reach their full potential. And for me personally, I'm a very strong believer in all things self-care and living life in balance. And I think that mental health is a really important part of allowing that and your overall health to really flourish. And so that's how I came to be a part of this field, and I absolutely love it.
Great. Okay, I should introduce myself. My name's Joy Langley, and as Gail said, I'm an emotional support coach for business people, helping you to build a stronger mind so you can have a stronger business. My whole pathway to this stage in my life was kind of a bit hit and miss. I worked in the early 80s as a secretary and a PA, personal assistant and secretary. I was pretty overqualified, if I should say myself. I had a degree in chemistry and business. And I couldn't find a job of my choice, so I ended up just working, which was fine. I was very depressed doing every single job that I had until I got into the music business, which I loved. And then later on, I was made redundant, and I became a self-employed person with my partner running a business company, which was very exciting. We got to interview stars. I interviewed Beyonce. Can you believe it? That's my claim to fame. And then after that, in my early 40s, I retrained in therapy, and it was more to do with me having a breakdown in the relationship after 15 years, and I wanted to find out who I was. And so that was how I fell into this, I call rabbit hole of wellness, personal development. And, 20 years later, I'm still doing that, elevated from working with, I suppose, people who have clinical depression. And I'm more focusing now on people in business who have similar problems, but are functioning really, really well. But then the emotions take over and things can go downhill. So that's just a tiny bit about me.
Great. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. So my story is kind of long. I started in the fitness and wellness industry in 1993. And, to be honest, not as a lot has changed in that industry since. Other than the real big part is that just the attention now in our environment, our world, that we're actually able to talk about mental health, which is really, really important. And over the last 20 years, I've actually put together, two incorporated companies. Currently the one that I have right now is Mental Wellbeing for Life, but it resides underneath of Endurance for Life, which I've done that coaching business for the last 18 years. And prior to that, in 2001, I also had a guiding company. Really when I think about, when I bring all of this together, including, I've got about 15 years in the corporate experience as well. And a long time ago, I realized that our entire human experience from birth to death really either improves or impairs our mental well-being. So I specifically work with, people, organizations, business owners, everyday, folks like ourselves around strategy and managing their energy. And, what the ultimate intent is around supporting their mental well-being. So I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you very much, Gail.
You're very welcome. And welcome to everybody again. Thank you for participating. And Mike, I'm going to start the conversation off with you. But let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurial mindset and how it sets the tone for how entrepreneurs see themselves.
Okay, I think I'll put it in the link after, but the one thing I want to do is a call out to the book. I think every entrepreneur really needs to read the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I don't make any money off that, of course, but honestly, it's such a great book, and really almost what it's, I'm about to talk about now, which is like the two different types of entrepreneurs. We kind of look at it as like someone that just wants a job, trying to be their own boss. Michael would call that individual a practitioner. So someone that's really good at the work, but just constantly want to open their own business so that they can be their own boss. And then the second type of entrepreneur would be one that wants to create an enterprise. So really about focusing on building a business and how to grow it, and really kind of hovering at 30,000 feet instead of, really being down in the weeds of it every day. And, why this is really a big important thing that I wanted to bring up today is that, both of these types of entrepreneurs require what I would call like an entrepreneurial mindset. And, I've been in the corporate environment. I've also, had a number of incorporated businesses, like I mentioned. And, in either environment, it is a mindset. And, I'll talk about it in a second, that kind of gets us in trouble a little bit. And, when I talk about that entrepreneurial mindset, it's really around, someone's super positive, no quit mentality, really highly visionary, a creative thinker, highly collaborative and persuasive, like in a good way. But one of the big struggles is around level of comfort with risk. That's, it's funny because I'm actually a climber. I mean, I don't talk about that on LinkedIn, but I've been climbing for 30 years. And, so there's a real correlation to kind of that comfort with risk and not. And, so someone in entrepreneurship that, really values stability is probably in for a little bit of a struggle, because there's anything but that. So, kind of summary on a, entrepreneur, I think, is around like that bigger, stronger, faster, and better sort of mentality. And, being someone that's owned a business for a long time, I believe it's not actually the owning a business that gets entrepreneurs in trouble, but I think it's the mindset. The mindset, oddly enough, is actually the exact same thing I've seen in athletes after coaching them for the last 18 years. Hundreds of athletes, whether they're beginner or advanced, elite level athletes. I coach some world-class individuals. And it really is about this mindset of more. And, the struggle with the entrepreneur, unlike the athlete, is that an entrepreneur typically doesn't get coached. And, as I mentioned in my sort of introduction, is that I really take care of managing people's energy and then supporting their mental well-being. So if a entrepreneur doesn't really get that type of support, they're almost like what would happen with my athletes would be complete burnout. And what happens with an entrepreneur oftentimes is what we would call burnout. And so the real dangerous thing with the mindset, it really comes down to entrepreneurs being unable to sort of balance work and life. This sort of success at all costs. Which in the end, nowadays, we have this, that term, the quiet quitting, everyone's heard about. And I really do believe that what it is it's a mental health crisis, to be honest. And so I think what has happened is individuals have reached sort of a breaking point, and what I would call it would be sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I think we really need to be very, very careful, and especially when we look at the mental health. There's such a big stigma already. So now, in essence, we're calling people that are struggling with their mental health quitters. So I think that's something that we really need to be cautious about. And so that's kind of the summary of what that kind of looks like. But the other part is that everyday people, even that don't have this mentality, will still have a breaking point, and oftentimes it's just different. So I hope that helps with that, Gail.
Yeah, no, that was a very, very good answer. And I'm going to go over to Joy now, because Joy, I know that your experience was a little different to Mike's. So if you could tell us a little bit about not only your experience, but what was the biggest challenges you faced, especially as they affected your mental health and your emotional wellness?
Yes, my experience is very different to Mike's, and Mike's had a lot of corporate experience. Mine's been one of working for other people for a good probably 10 plus years, then working by myself with my partner. So falling into business, as I called it, because we started up a business to promote what we were doing, which was music. So my ex-partner was a musician, my sister was a singer, and I just happened to be his girlfriend. So we decided to all get together and form a record label and promote music. And it was fun. We loved it. We loved it. We never made any money, but we loved it. So that was interesting. And I did learn a little bit about business at that time, but it wasn't, I would say it was very scrappy do. It wasn't that great. So my second experience of running a business was a bit more deliberate. I've been working as a counsellor for a college for probably 7-ish years. And at that point, they then made me redundant. And I'd already kind of thought about fireproofing my future, because previously when I'd worked for other people, I'd been made redundant, probably twice before that. And I just felt it's not going to happen to me again. And my main thought heading towards my 40s was, how can I fireproof my life so that this doesn't happen to me again and I can be independent? And that's when I decided to do all the training around counselling. So when I was made redundant, I thought, great, here's my chance to start the business that I said I would do. I also had a son at the time, so it was like I needed to, balancing that being a mum and also working is hard. Who's going to pick him up from school? Who's going to look after him when he's not well? I had a partner, not my second partner at that time. So it was like, it still falls on me. So my whole idea was to fireproof my life. Now, the second business was deliberate. And I thought, right, this time I'll do it properly. I'll do all the training. I'll learn about business, how to set it up, etc., etc. And so I did all of that, and I joined all the right directories so you could get the clients through. And I sat there by the phone, and it was radio silence. I thought, oh, that's not working. At that point, I really thought I'd done something wrong. So I'm quite a high achiever. I like to get things right. So I thought, well, I've done everything right. So what's not working? But little did I know that the whole point with business is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I really wanted to be this overnight success that has been painted and still gets portrayed to everyone that's starting a business. It's like you want it instantly. It doesn't work that way. So I had to settle back into having realistic expectations of what was going to happen and start learning about business, because no part of me was a business person. Absolutely no. So I did do some more retraining, followed some courses, joined some other people who had, advice centres, etc. And I just basically decided I was in there for the long haul, and slowly clients trickled in, and that was great. But the thing for me was I never earned as much money as I did when I was working previously. And that was an eye-opener for me, because this kind of nirvana, this kind of place of milk and honey with money flowing out the walls, and me having, pina colada on the beach, it just wasn't happening. So I
Mhm.
thought, wow, this isn't, I'm doing something wrong. So without a network around me and without tapping into other business people who were perhaps sharing some of their journey, being honest enough to share it, I really felt quite isolated with my thoughts of failure. And in a way, that was fueled by me deciding that I had to work in the same way as I did at work, which was sit at my desk all day, don't move, wait for the phone to ring, which meant I started isolating myself. And I wasn't around my friends, and my family probably noticed, but they didn't say anything. But I knew that I was withdrawing, basically. But I was becoming obsessive, and I would say obsessed with being successful overnight, which eventually I stopped doing that. So those were problems that I saw, was perhaps unrealistic expectations, becoming quite obsessive and working hard. I thought that the solution was work harder, just as Mike said. That wasn't the solution. You just make yourself quite unwell, and also then just, I think for me it was, why am I doing this? So the purpose of why I was doing what I was doing. I always loved mental health. I'd had issues myself in my 20s. My mum had problems when she was younger. So it was kind of like I had an interest in it. But I found that I was becoming unwell and I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to be seen as a failure. So I had to rethink, how am I going to do this? And being a therapist at the time, it's kind of like all of those skills, even though I shared it with other people and I was helping them to be well, behind the curtains, draw the curtains back, and I'm kind of falling apart. So I thought, that's not clever. You've got to practice what you preach. So I started
Mhm.
doing more self-care, and things started turning around. I saw more friends. I just became more comfortable with where I was going. And actually, with time, clients came in, and then I had the referrals. So clients told other people about what I did it well, got them happy. And that's where I am today. But I kind of now progressed from working at the clinical level to working with business owners, because I kind of get what's going on in their heads.
Mhm.
And they're sometimes lying to themselves and lying to other people, like I did.
Yeah. But I think that these stakes are sometimes higher for us as entrepreneurs than it could be for an employee, because employees can work hard, yes, but you know at the end of the day you're still going to get your salary, versus as an entrepreneur you may not know where your next paycheck is coming from. And then the other thing is that you can sit in your role in your company and function very successfully. You could be in marketing, but marketing is supported outside of your little space by separate finance. You have HR, you have operations, maintenance, you have health and safety. You become all of these people for your own business, especially if you're a solopreneur, and then you still have to manage your family. So it was interesting as we were researching and having conversations in preparation for today's conversation, that you realize how many different hats you wear, and how heavy these hats can be on you sometimes, because the stakes are, as I said, a little higher for you and the buck stops with you. So, Karen, I'm going to move over to you because I like to ask you to share your stats. I know you're the queen of stats. So, do you have any numbers that show us the correlation between being an entrepreneur and mental health issues? And then I also want you to share, like, what are some of the signs we can look for that will tell us when we really need to take a step back and assess what's going on in our lives?
Yes, Gail, I can speak to both. In fact, Joy did talk a little bit about some of these things. I'll speak on a little bit later, but you're absolutely correct. Mental health and mental illness, mental challenges are very common among entrepreneurs in this particular population. In one of the studies that I found, a group of entrepreneurial researchers, including the Dr. Michael Friedman, who's a psychiatrist and a psychologist, former CEO as well, at UC Berkeley in California. What they found in their study was that a staggering 72% of entrepreneurs were found to have some kind of a mental health issue, and that's a pretty large number. 1 in 4 entrepreneurs, according to this particular study, said that they will experience a mental health disorder in the future. And anxiety and depression were found to be two of the most common mental health issues that they experience, right? So it just goes to show just a brief picture of what are some of the challenges that this particular population faces. More specifically to Dr. Freeman's study, he found that twice as many entrepreneurs were likely to suffer from depression, and that they were 6 times more likely to suffer from ADHD, 3 times more likely to suffer from substance abuse disorders, and also twice as likely to have suicidal thoughts. So currently, I'm a mental health counselor working with persons with substance abuse disorders and co-occurring disorders in a rehabilitation facility. And one of the most common issues I see with persons who own their own businesses and come in as clients with us is anxiety. So the fact that that was listed as one of the most common mental health disorders really is not surprising to me. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding being an entrepreneur and having a small business. Of course, issues or concerns about finances. All of these are things that can play on a person's mind. So anxiety can look like difficulty concentrating and restlessness. But before I get too much more into the signs, I just want to nip back at some more stats. It's interesting because they had said that even though these numbers are pretty intense, only 15% of entrepreneurs actually report their mental health challenges. And so that's something that really speaks to the challenges in terms of persons reaching out for help. And a lot of people may feel as though like it's not something that they feel like they can talk to other people about, but it's certainly something that needs to be a big issue with this particular population. And it's important to know that even though these particular conditions like depression and anxiety aren't necessarily caused that just by being an entrepreneur, but certainly the stressful nature of entrepreneurship can exacerbate some of these pre-existing mental health issues that people have. In terms of these signs, as I said, Joy had mentioned some of them. She talked about withdrawing and being preoccupied with success. I'm glad that she was able to speak to her own personal experiences. And these are some of the things that people really need to pay attention to. So when you're an entrepreneur, you may think that all this work where you're so busy, a lot of times you're not really paying attention to what is going on with you mentally. And so it's so important to be aware of these signs. Stress and anxiety, depression, and burnout. It's really important to recognize these signs so that way you can take steps to really take care of your mental health before the consequences become too severe. So in terms of depression, what that can really look like for small business owners, the sadness may come in waves. They may have certain things that happen that may cause them to be sad for periods of time. The depression may be more prolonged and more intense, and this could be due to, financial failures, again, uncertainty as well. And the symptoms of depression and sadness, it can start to interfere with a person's sleep pattern, can also affect their eating patterns. So if you notice there changes in your weight, for some persons it's just about being restless and you have trouble controlling some difficult emotions. There may be feelings of pessimism and just overall
Dave?
distant thoughts, preoccupation with your business, and all of these are things that you really need to hone in and be mindful of if you are experiencing things like this. As it relates to stress, I find that there are two types of stress. It can be acute stress, which is short periods of tension, and then there's that chronic stress, which is like a more prolonged stress. And this again goes back to all the different hats that an entrepreneur is wearing and all the different tasks and roles that they have to take on. It can be really stressful. And chronic stress in and of itself is an indication of poor mental health. And if it goes unchecked, it can really lead to burnout. For a lot of people, they don't even recognize when they are burnt out until you're already in that place where you're overwhelmed and you're not able to manage. A lot of persons think again that that hectic nature of being an entrepreneur is normal, but in fact and in truth, that could be very that could be very telling of a person who may be going through burnout. And some of these symptoms of burnout that a person should really pay attention to is just generally you may feel tired regardless of how much sleep you're getting. Also, you may find that you're not putting in as much effort. Maybe you have tasks to do that you're not following up on. So you may be procrastinating, and all of these are things that may seem pretty normal, but in actuality, it could be that you may be experiencing burnout and that you may need to take a break and pay attention to what's happening with you, what's happening with your body. Burnout can also manifest itself physically. So you may find yourself physically feeling sick. You may have headaches, you may have stomach aches, signs and symptoms within the body that suggest, okay, that all is not well. And these are not things that are normal in terms of, yes, this is what entrepreneurs go through. This is actually an indication that mentally you may not be where at your best, basically, right? So it's important to keep all those things in mind. And these symptoms of the stress, and the anxiety, and the depression, they can have a very debilitating effect on a person, and it can affect their overall functioning, their ability to make good decisions. So all of these can have a snowball effect. It may seem very insignificant in the beginning, but of course, if it goes unchecked, it can certainly create more significant issues in terms of a person's overall health.
And that's a good point because the thing with your mental health and your emotional wellness is that as things happen, it doesn't happen they don't happen overnight. These things progress over a period of time. So I was listening to you talk and I was thinking back to myself before I crashed and burned when I was a part of the corporate world, and I had things happening to me that I was kind of ignoring. So like your hair dropping out is not normal. I know this. But then I had a rash in addition to the hair dropping out. I had, stomach issues. You'd eat late or not get lunch at all. And these things, and then there was this, in addition to the physical part, always feeling anxious, that you were never able to do enough. And I think sometimes then when you have a crisis situation, compound that stuff that you're going through. So like my situation was compounded by them being laid off unexpectedly. And I took all of this baggage then forward into the decision to become an entrepreneur without a coach and without much guidance. And that didn't happen overnight. And Joy was talking about things that happen overnight, but that was over a period of time. But if you don't step back and say, okay, really and truly, you need to do something, your hair is dropping out, you're anxious. I had a rash, I had all kinds of stuff. And you weren't able to focus. You knew things were going on, but then you didn't do anything to address the situation in a positive way. So, Karen, can you give us like just a few things? We talked about the challenges and we talked about signs we should look for, and I think signs are very important. What about some tips now that you think, like, what are some of the things we can do? And I know we're wearing two hats ourselves here today. We're talking to entrepreneurs, but we're also talking to normal individuals because mental health crosses all barriers. What are some of the things we can do to prioritize our mental health and our emotional wellness? Like, for example, what's the bottom hanging fruit that we can do almost immediately and then build on there?
Well, definitely, I would say start taking care of yourself first. If you aren't healthy, then your business is not going to be healthy. So
Mm-hmm.
really, you have to start taking care of self. And what that really looks like is integrating healthy lifestyle habits. So eating regularly, making sure that you get full sleep at night. And because of the nature of entrepreneurs, there's that tendency to work all hours into the night. That's not going to be well for your overall mental health. So really, um, really having that healthy lifestyle pattern there, also exercising as well. That does wonders for a person's mental health. You'll be more effective, and again, you're more effective mentally. You can make better decisions. Um, what I would also say too is to create really clear boundaries. You want to have a cutoff point, and that's going to be so important, or you could really find yourself running amok. So you want to create really clear boundaries, establish a routine where you have time in your day where you work, and then you have time in your day where you take off time for yourself. And you can use that time to really rejuvenate spiritually, mentally, physically, engage in things that you love to do, enjoy, hobbies and that type of thing. So you really want to do that first. What I would also say too is know when to reach out. Being an entrepreneur is no small task. So it's really important to build or have a really solid support system and to really nurture your relationships, family, friends, go out with those friends, engage with them, do things like that so that you recognize that there's work and then there's your life. You want to have a work-life balance, so to speak. What I noticed in doing some reading was that a lot of entrepreneurs, what causes the mental health illnesses is the tendency for entrepreneurs to maybe um, put the needs of the business before themselves. They put their needs last. And so, yes, you want to do well, you want to be successful, but if you can't be successful if you're not well. So, you really need to have that balance. But again, nurturing relationships, making sure you have a support system. If you're feeling overwhelmed, reach out for help. If you need to speak to a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, that's the most important thing. As I had mentioned earlier in the stats, only 15% of entrepreneurs report their mental health challenges. And it may be hard to reach out and ask for help, but certainly that's a big part of prioritizing your mental health. You're not able to do it on your own. And also, talking to people really allows you to get a different perspective, which is sometimes what persons need. So I would say take care of self first, engage in a lot of self-care activities, really nurture relationships, have clear boundaries, and make sure that you really practice, healthy lifestyle habits so that you are functioning well.
Yeah, those are some very good tips. And I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday, and her thing was she felt, in looking back on some of the things she could have done differently, being an entrepreneur really requires you to put on your mask first, because she
Mm.
was putting her business first. Well, the business was on the same level as the family, but whatever happened, she was last. And it wasn't, she couldn't function long term like that. And my other comment surrounds boundaries. One of the things we struggle with too is not only boundaries for maybe our clients, but boundaries for ourselves. So another comment she made while I was talking to her was, in terms of a boundary to be drawn, how long do you try to work with that client, that difficult client who is not paying you or who is pushing back, or you're giving them advice that they're paying you for as a consultant, but they're not following? How long do you hold on? Where do you draw the boundary, for that client to walk away? And I think her point was, sometimes we have to draw the boundary with ourselves to say, okay, how long do I go on before I make that big decision that will protect my mental health and my emotional wellness, you know. And I think the longer we leave these things, that's why people go postal and then they come into the office with a gun and shoot people. I know that's an exaggeration, but if you don't notice what's going on, actively do it, consciously, then it can lead into other stuff. So I'm gonna ask my other two panelists, like Mike, do you have any tips that you can share of your own? And of course, Joy, I'm gonna ask you the same question. Like, what are you doing for yourself to address to prioritize your mental health and your emotional wellness?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to have to springboard off of what Karen was talking about. And I really do think it's both for myself and also for other people, is that constantly evaluating your own mental well-being is really, really important. Karen had talked about a number of symptoms, And probably the easiest symptom to remember, and this is for yourself and for everyone, I always say is change. So I actually wrote an article a while back around this quiet quitting thing. And I think that it's, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's kind of underestimated at the impact of this, because it really is a mental health concern. I'm pretty confident that probably 99.9% of the people that are quiet quitting is due to a mental health concern. And, the thing is in order to be able to notice that you've got a mental health concern, you're looking for that change. And, one of the incredible resources that I've been working with myself and for all the other athletes and other individuals that, keeping an eye on their mental well-being is it's called the Mental Health Continuum. I put it into the chat. It is a link. And what it does is, if you want to think about it, it's sort of like a grade kind of from green to red. And the interesting thing is that years ago, I was going through a bit of a struggle myself. I've shared this on LinkedIn, and I could actually see myself going through the particular parts from green to red. And, it's got all of the symptoms that Karen spoke to earlier. So, it was really, really good in that way. But it's also a great tool for looking at others. So I think a really, really big piece of this is also turning to other people and getting them to sort of look out for you. And I'm going to talk about that in my second tip as well, is getting sort of some connections. But it really is about proactively talking about your struggles. And, as I mentioned earlier, all of our human experiences from birth to death will improve or impair our mental health. And, the secret here is just don't let it build up. And, oftentimes, one of the topics that, people have sort of mentioned over this last couple of weeks as we are starting to get closer to this event, they're talking about men and kind of this mentality around, toughness, et cetera. And I wanted to say, to refer back what I said earlier, which is it's actually a mentality. So it's not a gender, it is a mentality. So as I talked about that entrepreneurial mentality and, that must have more, stronger, faster. So, if you've been raised to be tough, not talk about your feelings and suck it up, honestly, this has never worked. And to be honest, in addition to that, it's the only thing that's going to really do for us is start to actually increase our suicide rates, which is really, really scary. Because there's so many people, entrepreneurs, I think that I can't remember if it's been mentioned yet, but I think we're upwards between 40 to 70% of entrepreneurs are impacted by mental well-being concerns. So, really it's about, if you're experiencing a change, it's about, getting on it right away. And, some of the stats I've seen and it's kind of scary, is that there's, over 800,000 people globally die by suicide. So that comes out to be about 1 every 40 seconds. And so just in this program alone, that we're looking at 80 people. So this is a really, really big and important topic. And as entrepreneurs and even individuals working in the corporate environment, absolutely something that is going to impact us all. And it goes back to the mindset again, is that sort of wanting to do more. You really have to keep an eye out for that, because it is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, I believe. And, so I'm going to follow that with jumping into the next part, which is tip number 2. And it's really about, don't go at this alone. Get out of your own head. If I look back at over the last 18, 20 years of being an entrepreneur, probably the biggest struggle has always been getting caught in my own head, having to come up with my own thinking. And when I first started off as an entrepreneur, LinkedIn didn't exist. So, we've come a long way. We've got a really, really good support system. So I think that's really important to turn to that, so getting out of your head and, building up a support system. And as Karen mentioned, get a great therapist or a counselor, someone that you can speak through those feelings with. And, in addition to that, is really, when you think of an entrepreneur and this mentality, is we have a tough time even asking for help. So just picking up the phone and getting past that stigma, that you're going to do all of this by yourself. So really it is about getting that extra support. And there's tons of resources out there, as Karen talked about earlier. If you have your family members have an EAP program, there's also tons of free resources. There's even free counseling services available. So, one other thing I'd say around that is, if you're looking at a counselor or a therapist, something like that, is don't give up after the first try. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the years that have given up on EAP programs or counselors, etc., on the first date. Honestly, it's very much like meeting your significant other. You're probably not going to find the perfect match on the first go. So just really be patient around that. It's really important. And as a coach, I really strongly believe that getting a coach is going to be really great for an entrepreneur. And what I would say would be a whole person coach. So, there's obviously like business coaches, and I mean, really, there's a coach for almost everything. So it's, kind of think of it as a life coach or someone that you can turn to. I myself have been working with one for 5 years, every week for the last 5 years. And it's really critical, again, to get out of your own head, to brainstorm through things with that individual. And you can talk about all the different parts and pieces, because every single part of our life will impact our mental well-being, as mentioned. So, really kind of getting those things out of the way and talking about them. And then the final thing, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit, is like, LinkedIn is wonderful. But the challenge that I've seen with entrepreneurs is most people are really concerned about losing their secret sauce. So, they're going to, whatever they're trying to sell, they don't want to give that over to someone else. And, if you do genuinely have that fear, I'd say just, seek some entrepreneurs outside of your industry, the same struggles, etc. But honestly, there isn't a question or a problem that hasn't been addressed already. So it's really going to be about just trying to find it. And you're not going to be able to find it unless you really try to reach out to other individuals. Again, whether it be a coach, a therapist, or someone you're collaborating with on LinkedIn. But just remind yourself, we are all in this together. So don't get caught up in yourself.
Those are some very good points, and I will agree that, well, it's unfortunate that you didn't have LinkedIn, Mike. I find that LinkedIn has been very, very good to me in terms of, you get to follow people, see what they're doing, expand your network. And I think LinkedIn has shown me for sure that I'm not alone. A lot of people, you think you're alone, but a lot of people are actually going through the same things you're going through. And it makes it a little easier, especially when it comes to, sharing ideas and, okay, well, you can try this. This is what I did. And they're very good for, for conversation, similar to what we are having now. Joy, would you like to share some tips with us as well?
Yes, I think all of Mike's points were very valid, and in a way, it would have been nice if someone, if you'd been there, Mike, 20 years ago when I was thinking about all of this stuff. But coming forward, it's the main thing I was looking at, the idea of having that kind of a barometer and working out what's going on for you. Doesn't matter, as you said, whether you're running a business or not running a business. My name's Joy, and I think I was given it for a reason, because I do just focus on, I just want everybody to be happy, and that includes me. That doesn't mean that I don't get depressed, because I do. And I find that the roller coaster of life happens anyway, and trying to stay in a space where you're being creative and you're spending your energy well and you're working at a very optimum level all of the time, it's impossible. But when you're running a business, you obviously think it is possible. So it doesn't make any sense. But I kind of judge it by how I feel. So if I'm in a good place, I write a lot and I'm friendly to everyone, including my partner and my friends. When I'm not, I'm quite, I get quite insular, and I'm just not good fun to be around. So I just generally have two ends of a scale. If you get like a ruler or a straight line, happiness and sadness, and just work at how you go up and down that, like playing a piano, the black and white keys, how you go up and down that. I go up and down that quite a few times during one day. So nobody ever tells you these things. Everyone's thinking we're all operating at this level. And Mike mentioned about having this kind of, I suppose athletic winning mindset, and he climbs mountains and God knows what. I mean, that's fabulous, Mike, but it's probably that kind of attitude about wanting to strive, which means that when you're resting, you think there's something wrong with it. Now, I love resting. And someone in the comments, I think it's Lynette, mentioned about, lying in bed and watching Netflix. For mine, it's like eating chocolate. I'm like, why am I eating all of this chocolate? So I kind of know when things I'm either trying to avoid something, procrastinate, or I'm well. So I look at my own personal signs, and that's the main thing. You know what they are. So going back to working, just starting out working, it was a case of every job that I had, I was fed up after about a month or two, completely depressed, had to stay there for a bit longer to get my CV looking good, and then I left. And it was like that until I fell into the music business and I got into the record business. It was something that I loved. And I never got depressed. So I had to make the connection between, hang on, Joy, depressed when you're doing this, happy when you're doing this. So when I got towards, 40, and I was thinking like, wow, I just have to really look at what I'm doing in life, because, I've got another 50 years plus on this earth. Let's make it good. And that's when I thought, well, you have to do something that you love. So a lot's written about finding your passion, finding your what makes you sing, heart sing, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, lovely. You do need to find that. And especially if you're going to be working in your own company and forming it, it's not something that you can just be excited about for a year or a year and a half or 2 years. Actually, what you set out doing, you're probably going to have that passion for it for a good 4 or 5 years, unless you decide to change business. So set out and do something that you really, really know you can sustain. It's not just an overnight success and then you suddenly can't put any more energy into it. So stay focused. But I just want people to think about this whole thing about, why am I doing this? And we go on a lot about purpose. So many words are thrown around and we all think we understand it, and nobody really knows any of it. All right. But purpose, a grander purpose, philosophical purpose. Why am I here on this earth? And for me, when we are helping other people, that's the best energetic place to be in. It does generate a lot of good energy. And I love this idea about when you give something to somebody, it's a great gift, because you're also giving something to yourself, because they feel good by receiving something and you feel good by giving something. So I think most people, running a business, whether it's a service business or whether it's a product, they're hopefully wanting this transaction between me and you to be something that makes you feel good. I mean, every time I work with someone, I just want them to feel good. Of course, the transaction is monetary, but I get a lot more than their money. Be quite honest, I get a lot of energy from other people, and I learn a lot about people. And Karen mentioned earlier on about just liking people and liking their minds and trying to understand it. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to, when I started, I just want to understand people. So I just think, remembering, why am I doing this? What's my definition of success? And everybody's definition is different. So I get sucked in by all of this billionaire mentality. It's like, actually, I don't need to have billions. I probably only need to have this much. And I'm actually really, really happy. And I have to keep on revisiting that, because the success which I'm trying to follow, just somebody else's footsteps, is not what I want. And you have to remind yourself of, what is it that I need? What makes me happy? And come back to that. And the self-care, Karen, I'm sorry, I'm guilty of not looking after myself. I'm not very good at exercising. I'm not, I'm thinking, I was listening to Karen, I was thinking, like, just hiding, like in shame, really. But I do know when I'm not well. And I think you just need to pay attention to it. And this whole thing about burnout, which is another word which people probably don't understand. But if you've been unwell for, a good week, 2 weeks, it's not the flu or this terrible stuff going around, then what is happening to you? You really need to work out, what the hell's happening to me? And it's your responsibility to take care of yourself, because there's no one else, as they say, that's going to rescue you. So
Yeah.
business isn't easy, but
It is not easy. I
that's
was going to say,
my penny
nobody's
worth.
coming to get you,
That's
Joy.
my
Nobody's
penny
coming to
worth. That's
get
my
you.
penny worth.
Before we go on to the next section, I will say that, it's good to come together and have a conversation, but looking back, it's not easy. I'm thinking of your last comment versus what Karen said about, less exercise, less eat healthy, let's do all these good things. But sometimes when you are in it and you have a deadline to meet, you're gonna, well, in some cases people forego the exercise at 30 minutes, 45 minutes, because you need to work on the deadline, or you're down in the trenches and you know you should eat lunch at a certain time or take a break, and you don't. You work right through, and it builds and it builds and it adds up. So Joy, you're correct, but unfortunately sometimes it's not a week, it's not 2 weeks. After a month or two, you look back and you're saying like, OMG, like what was I thinking, what was I doing? And we know too that if you don't take that break, I mean, I experienced that personally. If you don't take that break, your body's going to take that break for you. So I go back to drawing those boundaries and making those decisions. Am I going to work through my lunch time, my break time, my exercise time? Am I going to do that all of the time? Maybe for 4 to 6 weeks, which is the time I'm working on the project, so that at the end, my body is going to say, okay, you see, you did not listen to me when I was talking to you. Take 3 months off and lay down in that bed and you can't move. Because it's a balance. It's a balance. But if you don't step back, sometimes you have to pay the price and, pay the piper in the end. So I see Karen nodding and nodding. And I'm sure all of us, can relate somehow in some small part to that. And what I'd like to do is based on everything we've said before in my last few comments. And I'm just going to I'm going to say hi to everybody who's joining us, especially Susan. Susan is from Vancouver. And the thing is that Susan is saying that sounds like me. But it's not only you, Susan, it's you and so many of us that tend to put ourselves and what we need, on the back burner. And then we have bigger stuff to deal with. So I'm gonna ask. Let's start with Mike. Mike, we're gonna give some advice now. What's the one piece of advice you'd want people to take away from today's session? What's the one biggie thing, if nothing else, that they didn't remember from anything that we said today? What would you want them to remember?
And I think I have to almost summarize it. I think a little bit of advice around some reflection. And it was kind of, Joy actually brought it up a little bit earlier as well, as sort of reflection questions. Do you have an entrepreneurial mindset? And if you do, knowing that you're actually setting yourself up for some concern, because this mindset that I've spoken about throughout is something that has some, as I've said it earlier, it's our biggest strength and our biggest weakness. It's going to drive us to do incredible things, but at the same token, it will drive us down really, really quickly as we're trying to fit everything in, because we're not good at doing the work-life balance thing. And I guess the second question would be, why are you in business or thinking about going into business for yourself? Is this something that you specifically are looking, as I mentioned earlier, is this a job, or is this like, speaking for myself, I have these huge aspirations that, I've said over the longest time, I've said that, whether I'm at a corporation or in my, well, if I'm working in a corporate environment, I've often said that I feel like a square peg fitting into a round hole, meaning that even if I'm in a corporate environment, that I am going to be having this entrepreneurial mindset, and it can get you in trouble, because everyone gets a little bit, they get impacted by your, it almost looks at like it's aggressive, I think, in some ways, because you are so driven. So, really, why are you in that? And then again, putting it back to your business. And then, what is it about being an entrepreneur that you value more than working for someone else? And, I could say that we can honestly look back over the last 3 years around COVID. And, the values, the things that you've discovered over the last 3 years that you kind of all of a sudden got back, like work from home or, different things like that, you can put those into words, into values. So I've always known that I've really valued, flexibility and adventure and, learning and all that sort of stuff. So, I really need to have an environment like that. And being an entrepreneur brings that. And then, of course, there's a flip side to that. And then the last question that I would say, and again, this is more for, to think about, and this is all going to be in the chat for you for afterwards, is, do you have a business strategy? And I think why this is so important is that because us as entrepreneurs, we go into this, I get up every day at 5 o'clock, and then as Joy talked about, you kind of just get into it and you kind of go. But if we don't have a roadmap, we don't have a plan, it can be a little bit difficult to ever think that there's enough. And I think that's going to be really important, is just having that strategy to really lay it out and say, okay, this is enough. So those would be my
Where's that
ads.
noise coming from, guys? Wow. Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Mike.
Are you okay, Joy?
Yeah, I couldn't. I could only hear a
Okay.
lot of noise, and it was distracting me.
Yeah, could have been
Sorry.
some feedback.
Ah,
Okay, thank you very much. Those are some very good reflective questions. Mike, Joy, can you give us I want your one biggest takeaway as well?
yeah, sure. My one big takeaway is that for me, it's not a sprint; it's a marathon. And I think if someone had told me that it was not just a couple of laps around the circuit, Joy, because that sounds like a marathon to me. It's a traipse from where I am in the UK to where you guys over Canada or Barbados. I would have said, "Wow, is it that far?" I'd have been a little bit shocked. So I think a bit of realism would be a good idea. Getting some money behind you in your bank account when you start out, because if it's not going to be an overnight success, then you better make sure you can have the money to sustain yourself. I'd also encourage you to maintain your networks, at least, as I said, during the day, so you can have those breaks. It might be people that you meet up with. Getting away from the environment that you live in, because I can be within these four walls and get quite entrenched in that. So I have to make an effort to leave, despite what kind of schedule I think I have. And the self-care, I would like to think I do look after myself, although I can be very neglectful, because I know when I'm unwell, and I judge a lot of what I do by how well I sleep, and whether I'm eating properly, and whether I'm meeting my family or friends at the weekend. And if those three things are in place, then I'm actually doing all right. But sleep is at the top of my agenda, because if I don't sleep properly, then I really, really cannot function. So sleep 7 to 8 hours, if not more. They go on about 9 hours nowadays. I'm thinking, yay! But some people only want 5 or 6. And I think, well, okay, that suits them. But I know what makes me function. And my brain needs to work. I talk to people every day. I need to be able to string a couple of sentences together. So, and also at the end of it, it is going to lead to some creation of money. Fair enough. The two go together. But healthy mind, healthy business, title of this whole thing. That's the theme of this whole talk, isn't it, Gail?
I agree. And Karen, what would be the one biggest takeaway you'd want our viewers to leave with today?
I would say for me, my biggest takeaway, especially from a mental health counselor perspective, really is to make time for your own mental health. I see Lynette, she made a comment here, the why is really what keeps me pushing. And I think that's always really good to have that be there, that motivation to keep going. But you really need to be able to balance, balance your work, balance your life, and remember that you too have your own needs that need to be met and maintained. Building a business really takes time and dedication and a lot of tolerance. So it's really important, to keep nourishing your mental well-being, even when you feel like that balance isn't where you really want it to be, and you feel like giving up. It's still really important to take care of yourself, mentally and physically and emotionally. I think that would be my biggest takeaway for our viewers today.
Great. And I'm just going to read what Lynette says because her comment is a little long, but very meaningful and insightful. She says, the why is really what keeps me pushing. I believe wholeheartedly in the reason slash mission of my business. I want to do it. I love it. I'm always drawn back to it whenever I think to venture back to an easier road. And I think that's really important for us, to remember. And I'm going to see if I can bring up the comment we have here from Adrian. Thanks for joining us. And he's saying, be discerning with your energy, use it wisely. be intrinsically aligned with the who, why, how of your business and your life. And I think that especially links back to everything Mike was saying as my king of energy. I call my king of energy because it was only from these conversations that I realized how important our energy was, and then what we invest that energy into, linked again to what Joy is saying, because joy is so much a part of your energy, and what your joy in your life and the things you do with that energy will all add up and add to your emotional wellness and help you prioritize your mental health. So before we go, I'm just going to invite Joy now to tell us a little bit about, she has an online course that starts in December. I'm just going to put the link up. So Joy, can you tell us a little bit about your course and what it's about,
Yes,
please?
I can certainly do that very, very quickly. I've got a 5-day challenge course that you can do, and it's a very, very minimal price, which I think the link has been dropped in the chat. You doing that for me,
Yes.
Gail?
I am.
It's called Positive Mind Mastery. So this is my way of encouraging you to make some inroads into looking at your own mental health, looking at the breakdown of it, why stress happens, what drives it, the self-talk, and how you can solve it. So I think it's a very doable, very enjoyable course. I would say that, but I'm on it, but it's good stuff. I also have a book which kind of semi-accompanies it, and it's called Navigating Stress, and it's available in all good bookshops, Joy Langley. And just let me just say that the gentleman that was on, Adrian, is my coach. Mike mentioned about having someone good to coach you on a regular basis when you can afford it. It will make a huge difference to how you fare, and it will help you to have longevity in your business. So thank you.
Are you working on a second book, Joy?
Well, after listening back to the replay of this, I think this might be a book.
Okay. So I know that Karen, as usual, Karen, can you tell us a little bit about your wellness clinic, which we always try to talk about? Um, I'm going to put Karen's email address up for everybody in case they want to reach out to her from Barbados.
Yes, Gail, persons can reach out for us for information of services with our wellness clinic. So in addition to rehabilitation, we have also expanded our services. So we also provide counseling, individual counseling or group counseling sessions for persons who may be struggling with challenges in relationships, finances, or their work, or any type of issues of that nature. So persons can certainly reach out to us, and we also have a hotline as well. The number is 246-243-0038, and that's a 24-hour hotline. So any person that may be struggling with any mental health challenges, you can feel free to reach out to us so we can have a conversation and see how best we can assist.
Great. So Mike, it's your turn now. Tell us a little bit about what you have going on, please.
Well, you know what? I look at it over the last 30 years. I feel like I've kind of come to this culmination of where I belong. And as I mentioned earlier, I really strongly believe that everything that our human experience every day, comes back to a positive or negative impact on our mental well-being. And so as a coach, as a strategist, I really am here to support individuals, people within corporations, etc., around how can we look at creating, experiences within these environments, and even for looking at strategy, as I talked about earlier, for entrepreneurs. How can we put together things so that it has a positive impact on their mental well-being? Again, a strong believer in all those different things, and obviously, I have a very big circle of sort of my impact that I like to have on people. But I'm very fortunate that I can help basically through all 8 dimensions of wellness and well-being, physical, mental, all of the different ones. And so that's really what I have to offer. And I would definitely, I've got some great things coming up in the new year. You talked about books. I've got a couple books that I've been working on in the background as an entrepreneur. As we know, that's as a busy schedule as it is. But so I've wanted to write my book Endurance for Life for over 15 years now, and that's on the works in the background. And I'm also working on a book in the background that's going to be around how to embed a mental well-being culture, mental well-being focused culture into organizations, as it's really so important. So lots of stuff coming up in the new year. Right now I'm doing a transition with my website, but you'll definitely go on there. You'll see some things, and you'll see some even more things coming in the upcoming weeks. So thank you very much.
Yes, and you forgot to mention that you're also offering 30-minute free consultations if people would like to continue the conversation with you. And I'm sure Joy is offering that as well. And Karen. Karen is very modest and shy, but she's offering everything that everybody else is offering. I would like to wrap up by thanking everybody who joined us today. Thank you for your comments. I want to thank Adrian, Susan, and we also had Lynette and Diamond. Thank you, everybody who joined us. We look forward, of course, to having you connect with us on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're joining us from. Let's continue this conversation. It's important that we don't keep sweeping things like mental health or emotional wellness or suicide under the rug, because they're too important for us to keep covering. So thank you to everybody again. Thank you to my wonderful panel, Joy and Mike and Karen. I look forward to having you again next year sometime. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody who celebrates or observes Thanksgiving. And we will see you again soon. And thank you. Bye for now.
Bye for now.